So what you're looking at here is a collage of all of the interactions I had with the lobby. I mean, I left out about like 4 or 5 sections of video, uh, and sort of my interaction with the UI that wasn't the match itself. You can see that there's a couple of these that are actually playing rounds. That's kind of an accident. Those do end in disconnects though, so I don't really feel too bad about including them. In the background, you can start to see another match is occurring, and that's where the sound from this video is coming from. And those matches also end in disconnects. Uh, if you've never been to my channel before, I'm Zentry. I've been playing Guilty Gear since 2005 when I learned to play Reload on the original Xbox controller. And I have some thoughts about the Guilty Gear Strive closed beta test. I'm going to more or less tell you what I did for the survey that they had for us. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is they had sort of like a little very good to very bad rating for a bunch of different portions of the game. I said the obvious things: the character visuals, the animations, the stage graphics, to an extent the game responsiveness, the background music of the game, the visuals at the start and end of the round, the way the camera moves, and the sound effects. Those were all like I'm sure that they could be improved. I personally don't have any reasonable critiques for them though. The only thing I saw that seemed like sort of off is I've seen other players who were, especially like people playing Saul, where the camera would start to do strange things in the corner sometimes that would disorient the players and cause them to drop combos or simply just disorient them. The battle system I thought was sort of average. This game feels not really much better or worse than, say, Street Fighter V or Grand Blue Fantasy in terms of the way the interactions feel. The damage is overtweaked for sure, but if they adjusted the numbers, I feel like this game would end up feeling like Grand Blue Fantasy or Street Fighter V to a certain extent. But I don't think it would feel like Guilty Gear, which is really ultimately the complaint I have. But that's not to say that the battle system is bad or very bad. It's just, Guilty Gear is my favorite gaming series out of any type of genre. And I mostly enjoy story-based and narrative-based games, to be honest. But this is still my favorite gaming series because I've gotten the most enjoyment out of it. And honestly, it's provided, I feel like, incredible value. As fighting games tend to do when they're good. You can play them basically indefinitely. As you can probably tell, the thing I gave a very bad rating was the lobby system. The lobby was extremely detrimental to my experience of this beta test. I understand it's a beta, I understand it's a work in progress, I understand that this lobby may not even have been intended to be in the final version of the game. Maybe they were just trying to gather data about players trying to connect with as many players as possible, and this was a way for them to do that. But I have to say that if this is what's intended to be in the final game, it needs work. It needs a lot of work. The other thing I'd kind of like to mention here is the UI. For the most part, I don't really have that many negative comments about the UI. I mean, the combo numbers are kind of distracting, I suppose. I didn't really notice them that much while I was playing, but they don't really look that great, I think, from a spectator perspective, perhaps, and especially if you take freeze frames of the game, they look absurd. The thing that I think is actually sort of bad in the UI is the risk gauge is very small. It's a thin purple line, and I think that that's one of those things that's left people really believing that the damage in Strive is always absurdly high. It's not really the case. Those 90% combos, they blocked like 3 or 4 things beforehand, and that's what led to the damage being so high. The risk gauge is pumped up, but you can't see it. You're not going to notice it unless someone points it out specifically to you. And I think that's a problem because even once the damage numbers are tweaked, as they presumably will be, out of the stratosphere and to more terrestrial levels, you're still not going to know why sometimes you take almost twice as much damage as you normally would. And that's a big problem that I think they shouldn't exacerbate by making like one of the major causes for that problem difficult to see. And that's a thing that they've done here with this risk gauge. And I understand that they were trying not to actually have players see it who are newer so it wouldn't distract them. That really doesn't make sense to me. So, other things that the survey touched on, it asked about, like, visibility. Aside from the lobby, the only thing that seemed cluttered was, well, actually, it was just the lobby. The lobby seemed real cluttered. Everything else was fine to me. Uh, I liked the way that the visuals looked. I thought the music was fun and exciting. Personally, I like this style of music. I understand it's not everyone's taste. Lenny attacks I thought felt very visceral. I do understand there's some concerns about how much slowdown there are when moves connect. It's difficult for me to know how detrimental that might be long term. Some people seem pretty concerned about it in videos and reviews I've seen and read. Personally, I just would prefer it not to have any risk of causing me to drop inputs. I have seen videos where people have said that is what it feels like happens when you get these really ultra slowed down situations from the counter hits like you saw there. The other thing that I liked was at the end of the rounds you'd get these little snippets where they tell you about how good you did. I don't know if those were accurate, but they were nice. They felt nice. And I think that they should stay, and if they can be accurate, that would be really cool. Regardless, it's kind of nice to have something to sort of pump you up a little bit because you did well. The thing that, of course, is the longest portion of this is the portion where they asked what I disliked about the closed beta test. I've already mentioned a lot of stuff. To boil things down the way that I tried to do for this survey, what I said was I'm concerned that long-term I would not find Strive fun. The matches reminded me of Soul Calibur 6, where initially the game is fun, but as you take the game more seriously and start to try to refine your gameplay, it starts to feel simply chaotic and arbitrary, with risks seeming to have no relation to reward. And what I mean by this is that at any given moment in Soul Calibur, there's only a couple approaches that you can take. If your opponent guesses wrong and gets hit by one of them, it's not out of the question that they simply lose. And it's worrying that this game might end up feeling kind of the same way, whereas in other versions of Guilty Gear, you had like a huge array of options and so did your opponent, so it felt like your judgment was being asked to be used more prudently for the different decisions you might make, and that there was just more subtlety and complexity to the system. Another thing I didn't really like was how the Gatling system's removed and how the throw buttons changed from being on heavy slash to being on the dust button. I understand that that's simpler, but I have years of muscle memory that I've learned specifically from playing Guilty Gear that tell me to throw using the heavy slash button, and now it's just detrimental that I have that muscle memory that I've played Guilty Gear for so long. And that's really disappointing.
What the fuck?
The Gatling system made it feel like you could do combos even when you didn't really know anything. I liked that. It also made combos feel more organic in that you could sometimes really mix things up when you sort of messed up a timing. Maybe you could go in for, you could still claw back a little bit of something with like switching maybe to mashing punch or something into a special because you missed the timing for a link. You still get like a combo, or alternatively, you just have all these options. Do you want to knock down? Do you want to knock them away? Do you want to reset to neutral? Just all these kinds of things that are all considerations in Exard and XX, but didn't really feel like there were going to be considerations here, because once you hit with the first move here, it felt like there was a particular combo you were going to be doing, and that was that. I've already made my opinion clear on the lobby system. I think that the existing combo system isn't bad, like I mentioned before. I just don't know that it feels like Guilty Gear. I'm concerned that maybe the game could be solved, sort of in a certain sense, for optimum damage or optimum damage with knockdown, or that sort of thing. Like the sort of stuff where it's sort of unfeasible to solve a lot of that stuff in previous iterations of the game, because there were enough potential options for what you could do that it was, there were a lot of things that were roughly equivalent, You know, only a couple points difference in damage, that sort of stuff. Slight difference in where players land, slight difference in how long you have to set up Oki. And all these different trade-offs were, you know, contributed to the depth of the game. And I just don't know, they don't feel like they're necessarily here in Strive the way that they would if the game more closely resembled a, an older version of the game like XX or Exoid. The other thing I noticed is that defensive matches in this game, like the longer turtley matches, feel like it just felt really difficult to open people up sometimes. I know you can hear me in the background here. I didn't separate the audio properly when I recorded all of this, like I normally do, and so unfortunately that means that I don't have good control over when I have voice in my footage or not. Anyhow, you know, the defensive matches, like you can see here, they felt like really grindy. It felt really difficult to open people up. Even when you do open people up, you're only doing a little bit of damage if you're not doing anything crazy. And, you know, full screen, you're not going to do anything crazy. But you sort of see what I'm getting at, I feel like. There's sort of an unusual way that the game ended up feeling, where if you were playing against weaker players, it felt like the damage was too high, and if you were playing against moderately strong players, sometimes you would feel like nothing was happening and that things were kind of dull, honestly. And you know, there's a bunch of other questions on this survey. Those are I think really the high points. You know, and some of the other questions on here are kind of fun, like what franchise would you like to see Guilty Gear Strive in collaboration with? I put Darkstalkers because, you know, among my friends group and like some of the people I play with, we've, you know, long agreed that it would sort of be incredible if Arc System Works actually made a new Darkstalkers game, like the way that they made Dragon Ball FighterZ and Grand Blue Fantasy Versus. If Capcom just handed Darkstalkers to them and was like, "Hey, make this game," that seems like it would be unbelievably sick, especially with the way that they've managed to make games look. Like if Darkstalkers looked like this, I can't even imagine how nice it would be. That would be really cool. They asked what returning characters you'd like to see. You know, I put like a wide range of stuff here, but I'm not entirely sure how many of these characters would function properly in Strive. Like for example, Zappa is a character I've always wanted to see in Guilty Gear again. He was my main character in XX, and I thought he was feasible to have in Exard. But in this game, even the weaker iterations of Zappa, you know, even if like a lot of them didn't really even have combos per se. Their combos were similar to what you're seeing here, and they were still like, they weren't like very good in the grand scheme of things tier wise, but they were very frustrating characters. And when they were doing their thing, it was extremely upsetting. Like it was a bad time to deal with. But you know, that's sort of like to say having returning characters is, it's really up to the developers to include the most fun characters they can, I feel like. I'd love to see Zappa back, I'd love to see Venom back. I haven't seen Order Saul in a long time. Abba and Enji Mito were, I thought, really cool. It'd be sad if Eno or Dizzy weren't in a Guilty Gear game, or Testament was missing. You know, that kind of stuff. But those are essentially my thoughts.
What the fuck?
I appreciate you listening to this video, and, you know, like, comment, and subscribe.